Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's Cyber Banter. Today, I have the pleasure of a good friend and mentee of mine, Kage, who will be here to answer questions about anything and everything of what it's like to transition into this field. So, Kage is currently at Appalachian State University, where he's getting his computer information systems and cybersecurity degree. Kage will be able to talk about some of the mentorship that he and I have done in the partnership with AppState, to talk a little bit more today about just what kept him interested, what drew him to this field, and many more. So, Kage, I'll hand it over to you if you want to say anything else.
I'll just introduce myself a little bit. Like Fletus said here, my name's Kage. I'm a dual major in computer information system and cybersecurity with Appalachian State University. I'm also an IT consultant with the university. Like I said, I've known Fletus for just getting up there with time a bit there. Like over a year give or take. Um, and I mean, it's been a super pleasure to be able to talk to him about cybersecurity and be able to learn a little bit what he says.
I appreciate those kind words. So, yeah, as we alluded, so tell me why Appalachian State? What drew you to App?
So originally, before Appalachian State, I was in a Western Carolina University. Funny enough, as a psychology and a political science major. I was always interested in IT. I have to say, probably my first job in the family was to be the unofficial IT support. And so that kind of followed me through my college when I first joined Western Carolina, and I joined the student workers in IT there. And as I just progressed through the semester there, I started realizing like this is what I enjoy. Nothing's guaranteed about getting to psychology and anything with political science. So I made the jump to computer information systems. I looked around other colleges to see what they had, and App State was really the only one with computer information systems and cybersecurity in the College of Business, and I valued that a lot. And so that kind of made me interested in Appalachian State and looked up a bit more about them and made the full decision to transfer over there.
Yeah, shameless plug. I'm an '09 grad of Appalachian State, so I get to talk about the college. The reason that Kate and I got to meet is a little bit more plug there is I serve as the advisory board member, and I've been speaking probably too long now, almost 13 years. I've been on the advisory board with Appalachian State. But in my time in that role, I've been able to sit through several different opportunities and get to know a lot of different students. And Cage is one of them. Because of the advisory board, I've been able to sit in front of the students. I've been able to guest lecture. I've been able to get into a community. So for those who are listening, App, as well as their lecturer, their lead instructor for their cyber program, decided to set up a community. So what he set up was a Slack community. Inside that Slack community, it allowed professionals such as myself and other advisory board members to get that asynchronous opportunity to meet with Cage. So, Cage, what has that Slack community been like for you, and what value have you seen in that?
Well, it's a treasure trove of information. It's probably the one of those would probably be described as a micro community where entry level, those who are interested in the field, can have a direct communication with industry professionals who've, from any degree of experience, from first uh, entry levels to those who's been in the field for over decades. And so that's probably the biggest advantage of that community. It's really a place where everyone can get together and ask questions.
I appreciate that. Yeah. For those who know, most of us as professionals have used this speed dating thing called LinkedIn. That's where most of us cut our teeth is in the social medias, even though some of us, personally myself, might have been in some IRCs, some other channels or bulletin boards prior to that. But we all know what it's like to have a network to community. So for what we did at App and what Cage's reference here is we set up a Slack community. Inside that Slack community, we have several key channels. One of them is just security news. We have an RSS feed that allows them to see daily updated news that we would get for those like myself who run a security operations and need to see what comes in 24/7. So that's an avenue that they have in that channel. We also have a dedicated security channel where we can talk about security events, security topics, which leads me into another channel that we've set up recently called a webinar series. Kage and a few other students at Appalachian State were asked to participate, volunteer only, outside of the school, in a 4-round series. Inside of these rounds, they were challenged to come up with a 20-minute presentation. During that presentation, they're speaking to anywhere between 3 to, let's say, 10 industry professionals who are there to listen and then help them critique. So in this webinar series, we are giving them a topic, giving them 20 minutes, and then we give them some positive feedback and then some constructive criticism / feedback as well. So Kage, can you walk me through kind of the topics you chose and why you chose to be part of this webinar series?
Well, I'll go first with why I chose to be part of the webinar series. It's being a college student. A lot of times we're told how important public speaking is, and professors will try their best to set up opportunities to allow us to make a presentation and present to the class. Nothing to be scared of. You're surrounded by peers, and that's what professors try to do to foster. I will admit I'm a little bit introverted. I don't really like to talk to a large group of people. But given at this time I've known Fletus for a good bit, and so when the opportunity presented itself to basically go into a competition for a presentation, getting constructive feedback for those who's been in the business, and that valuable insight, I said, yeah, I'm going to do it. So that's why I joined. And so for the first round, I did a ransomware as a service. I picked ransomware because it's an interesting, it's in-your-face malware. There's no denying that you have it or you have it not, because you're going to know if you have a ransomware on your system. And so that's why I picked it. I'm more interested into the threat side of things of cybersecurity. So I like learning about the Trojans and viruses and remote ware and all that stuff. And so that was my first round. My second pick, I did supply chain security. Supply chain security, it's a very fascinating subject. If you don't know what it is, it's briefly taking a look at what exactly everything leads up to. So an example I used in my presentation was like, think of a pencil. We all know the components of a pencil is the graphite or the lead, the wood shell, the eraser bit. And when you start talking about, example, the wood shell, we know that it comes from a tree, but that tree had to be processed. And you start seeing how complicated and how everything ties together. And supply chain securities being that you have to secure each step of that process. And, I drag that into, think of Microsoft Office and Word, to get more into the cyber side of things, because that was a very literal and physical of supply chain security. And so, Microsoft created Microsoft Office, which is the cloud base. And then they created Microsoft Word, not exactly that order, but you get what I'm saying, that there's still that component of each step has to be taken. And because of those steps, each of those steps is vulnerable to an attack. And I guess I'll tease my third round. And I chose what is a honeypot and how it's used in cybersecurity. Honeypots are very interesting because the whole purpose of them is to look like a vulnerable server. I guess it's not to look like, it is a vulnerable server. However, there's no any critical information in it. And the point is to see who's trying to look around in it and how they're doing it. And so that's my third subject. And I think it's going to be pretty good.
So speaking of that one, first off, before we dive in, I just got to tell a story here. I didn't personally do this, but I had a very good friend of mine share that they decided to use honey files, honey tokens, and they placed a file on every single end user's desktop. The file was labeled payroll. Just imagine you walk in on Monday morning, you boot up your Windows 11, and all of a sudden you see this new icon on your desktop. Are you going to click on it? Most of our users would, because out of pure curiosity, I don't remember downloading this. Is this my payroll? Is this whatever? that was supposed to have been pushed to some critical places instead of being pushed to their entire environment. Let's just say their stock got a lot of alerts for that honey file because, to be honest, it allowed their security awareness team to know what training to do next. So the lesson learned there, even though this was a bad deployment by their security team, it was a good opportunity for end user management. So lesson learned there for those listening, be curious. Don't just click on what's on your endpoint. But with that, Paige, we talked about the webinar series. So that's a little bit about how you get hands-on outside of the academia. Tell me other things that you found interesting to go above and beyond the academic side of the undergrad experience.
Well, I mean, it's a lot of it is just doing. It's a little pompous to say common sense. We can get into a whole argument or discussion about what's the purpose of a university when it comes to like high technical subjects of field like cybersecurity, but a lot of it is certification training, doing things with industry professionals, doing those presentation, developing those soft skills and hard skills. Me personally, with another mentor, I have done a Linux lab with Tommy Todd, and in that Linux lab, we created our own essentially server, developed it from scratch, and we're been a little bit of a hiatus on it, but we're going to start implementing those like Apache binds, those critical aspects of creating a website. And the eventual purpose of it is to attack it and kind of see what it looks like to see something you've created getting attacked and destroyed. But those are just one of many examples that I've personally taken to get to continue what I've learned in class and taking it out of class to get further experience.
So not really a shameless plug, but a shameless plug for App. Tell me about some of the hands-on opportunities that you've gotten in your managing security, your IT audit, your ethical and countermeasures classes. Talk through some of those labs and what those have done for your confidence and potential career path.
So a lot of the labs that I've taken, it was through Siren. I believe I'm saying it right there. And they do a lot of kind of guided scenarios. For example, we looked at like a Active Directory service and how not how it's implemented, but how do you manipulate it? How do you use it? And it's for those who may be listening, you may not know really what's the purpose of Active Directory, but to make a long story short, it's essentially where a lot of your information is. And we don't really have a lot of opportunities to really play with an Active Directory. But those are some of the labs that we do. Another one, like the countermeasure, that has a lot of great, I don't want to say general information, but it has a lot of cybersecurity focused information that it's basically your job to look at those terms and kind of go forward with them. And that gets to like some of the controls, which is another way of just saying countermeasures. What is one of the terms where it's like, what's a deterrent control? What's operational control? What's a managerial controls? Those are all just countermeasures that are taking place. And, as easy as it just say the terms, you got to look at those terms, like how are they used and implementing to an actual system.
Yeah. And the other thing too, that as we were talking about here, and he's alluded to, taking what you're hearing in a lecture or reading in a book and actually touching your keyboard. So for other examples, Kage may have not gone through them. They've had a lock picking. They've done a keylogger. They've had experience with defending certain things. Other opportunities that he can allude to is they've been introduced to what a capture the flag looks like or to defend the flag. And I'll ask him more about that. But for those who are listening, take that opportunity to figure out what it's like a home lab. So he talked about building a Linux lab. Do something simple at home. Build a basic DNS to do sinkholing because there's so much traffic that comes from your IoT devices, your Internet of Things. So with that, Kage, talk through kind of what it's meant to have the ability to do some capture the flags and what are some of the capture the flags you participated in?
So one I'm doing right now is through the National Cyber League. They basically host I would almost argue to say probably one of the largest university, not led, but university participated capture the flag. We're compete against probably over 100 different universities to get one of a covenant spot in the top 100s. But capture the flag event, kind of describe what that is. It's, at least for the NCL, it's all about going through a specific domain. So like, let's say for example, like a log analysis, because that's what I've been learning a bit more. With log analysis, you're basically given a whole bunch of human readable data, yes, but you're given tons of thousands of lines of data. It's not practical for you to go over each and every single line. So it's your job to go over, not data manipulation, but, for example, like cat, grep, awk. And it's your job to use the hints that the NCL gives you and go over those data. And, I'm kind of focusing a lot on log analysis, but the point of it to capture the flag is to go over details that are provided to you and exploit the system.
Excellent point. And shameless plug here. KC7 is another great one that's been brought up. Take a look at that. Another shameless plug for those who are involved. I'm plugging this now. SANS Institute is doing their New to Cyber Summit all day tomorrow on March 13th. They will have KC7 as their capture the flag part of that event. So anyone who's looking to break in or new to cyber, go out and check SANS New to Cyber. They will have a lot of key talks. I'm serving on the advisory board for it, so I help choose some of those talks. So on that note, look at that. So Kage, we have our first question for you, since we're talking from Jeffrey here, is do you have a home lab? And if so, what are you running on your lab, hardware and software?
It's a bit of a yes and no. I hate to give those type of answers. I'm in the process of developing one. So I've not recently, but I've been a lot more interested in NAS. And those are network
Attached
storage. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, network attached storage, and I've been getting a little bit more fascinated with them. But to kind of not run them, but they required basically a lot of storage. I don't produce that much storage, so that got me down kind of a rabbit hole. And I've been getting interested in SKey servers with VMware. And as far as hardware goes, that is currently running on a Power Edge, which is a Dell server. I couldn't tell you the specific one that I'm using, but that right there runs the SKey server, and I'm in the process of kind of putting them all together. I'm getting to a point where I kind of want to mess with like a load balancer, not because I'm actually need the load balancers, but when you get to an enterprise level, they're needed. And so I kind of wanted more experience with that. So like I said, I can't give too much specific because it's all in the building, but generally speaking, that's kind of the combination that's come together.
Yeah, and Jeffrey, I'll give you mine. I've had a few over the years. Right now, I've simplified my back just to a simple Raspberry Pi running Pi-hole, as I alluded. I have 2 interns at home that I want to protect, so I put in some family safe DNS so they don't accidentally get redirected to adult content or malvertisement. And so that's mainly for me. Because I work from home, I have dual networks. Oh, I have my network for my company assets, which is what I'm using right now. Then I have a guest network / a kid network that allows my kids to use, because we homeschool, their laptops to be connected, and then I can control what they go to. So I have a very simple. In the past, I had a single RU box that I put some VMs on that I would SSH into to run some stuff. I've recently switched to just cloud. I spin up an EC2. I play with some stuff. I spin it back down because I got to the point where I couldn't cool my stuff effectively, and I didn't want to keep paying for the AC cooling inside of my house as I was building out a rack. So I sold that rack a couple years ago and decided just to go back to small format stuff. So I've had Apple Minis that I've done stuff on. I've done the Raspberry Pis, and now I just do cloud-based lab equipment. So great question. Appreciate it. Which leads me into our next key discussion here. So we've talked about this a little bit. You're an undergrad student. You have decided that you wanted to get some experience. So tell me how working at AppState in their IT department, what does that role look like and how is that positioning you to use what you're learning or not use what you're learning?
So kind of not to re-clarify, but once again, I'm an IT consultant for the university, and I work at the support center. So at the beginning, I did a lot of client-facing support. So an example would be, client comes in, it could be anything as simple like, hey, my computer's not turning on. Okay, take a look at it. Could be that they, as simple as, oh, they're not using the right charger, therefore they need a more powerful one, or I need to just simply reseat their battery, which means just opening the back of the laptop and unplugging and plugging it back in. As that concept still follows us to even now. And those are kind of an example. I'm sorry I'm being like vague, but unfortunately, it's just anything that happens through that door, anything that walks through that door, they have an issue. I would generally try my best to figure out how to solve that issue. It could be as simple as like software problems, like, hey, Microsoft Word's not working. And it can be hardware problems as, hey, the screen's not turning on. But that's when I was first in. As an IT consultant there, I don't want to say I've leveled up, but I've slowly gotten more responsibility. And I don't think it will be an issue by saying this, but recently we were adopting Intune. And recently they told me, hey, take this class. We foresee you having a lot more responsibility with Intune, which would be probably be the best way to say it's a kind of a management program. Um, it's probably more accurate to say it's a suite because it's a combination of many of the other Microsoft products. But looking at that and how it's helped me, it allowed me to get a better grasp on it's a little bit weird to say as what a computer is and what it does. Even though I don't use the word correctly, I'm a foundationist or a fundamentalist. And I believe that, to first get into cybersecurity or working in cybersecurity, you got building blocks that you must go through and that to better help understand what you're defending or what is being used to operate your entire system there. So I would say
Yeah.
that's how IT consultant helped me in my understanding.
Yeah, so I'll add a little bit to that because I think it's important. And this is going to sound probably counterintuitive. The things that I grew up when I cut my teeth in the mid 2000s is not what Cage is having to learn to cut his teeth. Now, when I was doing my first off, most of my stuff was on prem. Most of my stuff was sitting inside of a data center. Most of my laptops were beefy. They were usually desktops. Very few people in the company had a true laptop for work because there wasn't remote work. You came in, you powered on, you and you went home. Got a few more years into it, laptops became a little more prevalent. Laptops now had VPN software, so your virtual private network, so you could work remote, especially for those in IT. We all know what happened in 2020. It forced companies to figure out quickly how to take office-based employees or field-based employees and give them a remote access. And that's where all this unified communication came into play. So with that, Cage, now that I've talked about a little bit of a history, my history is going to be different than your history. What I may have been touching 20 plus years ago when I first cut my teeth in 2005 on this technology is not what you're cutting your teeth on in 2025. So with that, what in cybersecurity interests you and where do you want to see your first job and what kind of technology slash skill sets do you want to sharpen yourself on in the next year or two?
Um, probably easy to say that I've always been interested in cybersecurity. Kind of, heck, I'll kind of even say that's the reason why I went to App State, or even though I was in political science and a psychology major, I still had a passion for computers, and so what made me interested in cybersecurity, I probably be what we all first thought what cybersecurity was before even the term cybersecurity kind of became popularized would be, hacking, or like, what is a hacker? How, what is a hacker doing to get into your computer? And I always found that interesting. Like, how can you sit in your room with your computer, touch someone else's computer virtually, and get into it? And I've always found that interesting. And that interest kind of fueled the flame for cybersecurity even now. I will admit, with going through AppState with their cybersecurity program, when it comes to hands-on, we have a little bit more lean on red teaming, which is another way of just saying penetration testing, which is another way of saying hacking. And so that's kind of where the passion was born. And continuing onwards, this kind of reaffirmed, yeah, this is what I want to do.
So we touched on this a little bit ago, but we have a question here from another person just asking, how's being part of a professional community or industry groups helped that passion of learning about the offensive that you just spoke of?
Well, being able to talk to essentially like-minded people and those who've, the footsteps that I'm trying to follow, being able to talk to them, seeing their perspective on it, seeing like what they've done, learning not from their essentially failures, but, a little bit of that, don't do what I do is a common saying, but, learning from their success also is very helpful. And so being a part of this community, I'm still trying to get a career. However, it has further ushered me to continue taking steps, knowing that, not to say that I'm alone, but knowing that, the people ahead of me, what they have done, hearing their stories has continued me to push forward and to continue with this career path. So that's what I'll say, that, how being part of a professional community has helped me.
So I'm going to have a proud mentor moment here. Hearing his response there has been something that I've been able to preach many times, both to him and to others. I'm not looking to clone me. I'm looking to help Kage and others understand this is how I got in the ditch. This is how I got out of the ditch. So you can know how to do that in the future. Don't repeat my mistakes, as he just said. I think he used a different analogy, but it's very similar of understanding. We have to pass the torch and we have to be willing to share knowledge. So to answer that question, it's been a powerful thing to be a mentor and to be part of community. So for anyone out there, I preach reverse mentorship. It's important to have three connections in your life. So have someone ahead of you, someone who's in the role you want to be in, someone who's done this a few more years, or someone who's not in the industry directly. So it's an adjacent leader. So a director in a line of business who can mentor you on just career progression. Then having a peer beside you, someone who's close to you in title, years of service, etc., who you can lean on and have a healthy competition against. I want the next raise. I want to find the next bug. I want to solve the next problem. And then, like what I have here with Kage, is the generation behind me, the one who I want to take my job. I want to pass on that knowledge and do knowledge transfer so that when Kage enters the workforce, I can either move up or move out. You heard me right. I want to move up or I want to move out. Moving out is just as important. You've got to give an opportunity for that opportunity. So again, reverse mentorship is great. Kage and I have talked about a lot of different things in the year and a half we've met. There's been opportunities where he's given me an insight to make me go go scratch that itch of, hey, I haven't thought about that, or I haven't looked at that in X years. For those who've listened to some of my streams and some of my shorts, the curse of knowledge is real, folks. It's hard to be a novice again. So the importance of doing what we're doing here and having this banter, having this Q&A with the next generation, the next person who's coming in, is important because we don't know how to cut our teeth again. We're past that in our career. For myself, I've done this since 2005. That's 20 years now. I don't remember what it was like to break into this field. I do adjacently because I'm helping people break into it, or I'm trying to, year after year. So for those that are listening, either now or on the repeat, find a mentor and be a mentee as well. It's important for your career. Great question by Christopher Taylor here. Find a professional community or industry group. Learn from them, but give back to them. So it's almost more important to give back than it is just to glean. You don't always want to be the person who's just coming to take. Kage is not one of those individuals. I'm honored to have him. That's why I asked him to join me today. He comes into the meetings willing to ask thought-provoking questions. He's not just saying, give me this. So make sure you're doing that in any partnerships. So with that, I've asked for more questions, but while we're doing that, Kage, tell me what's one thing outside of cyber that keeps you willing to come back? So I know that for now you guys are on spring break from app. What are you doing to decompress?
For decompressing, probably it's going back to the roots. At the end of the day, as you know, for some people it may not sound like decompressing, but when I say I love the computer, I mean that in every sense of the word. I love the computer. For me, going on the computer and don't want to say learning more about it, but using my knowledge to further progress like my home system. I find that enjoyable. I like creating something and seeing it grow. And so, over the week, yes, I've been, essentially being lazy. However, you can always find me at my, I won't say my home lab, but my computer and tinkering with it, improving it, looking up like, oh, hey, there's this new program that came out that's hope the, better help with your installing new drivers, and stuff like that, and, that's kind of what I do outside of cyber, go back to the roots.
So, Kage, we've been at this now for about 30 minutes. So I just want to recap a little bit where we've been, and then I'm going to turn it over to you for some questions, comments. But so for those who've been listening or listening in now, we've talked about why he chose to go to school, what made him transfer. We talked about how cyber fell into his lap, something that was an interest. He was not majoring this when he first went into school. It wasn't until he sat down and really looked back and reflected that drove him to Appalachian. Once he was at App, we talked about the importance of getting into a community. We just talked for the last couple of minutes on how that community is set up. Lucky for him and lucky for other students, App has taken professional development for the student very important. We've partnered, myself included, have partnered with the instructors, the professors, the school as a whole to continue to give students an outlet to have access to us. That's via Slack, that's via guest lecturing, that's via meetups. They have a cyber summit that they host. Those have been opportunities for students such as Kage to get opportunities. He talked about his aspirations to continue to learn. So he's dived into his consulting with the IT services. He's talked about the importance of hands-on. We've talked about labs. We've talked about capture the flags. We talked about opportunities to do a public speaking engagement through these webinar series. All of this right now is what we need to continue to look for, and not just the next generation, but also in us. I'm talking to myself here. How do I continue to perfect my public speaking? How do I continue to be involved in the community? How do I continue to pass the torch to the next generation or to the person beside me? So with that, Kage, is there any advice, questions, comments you'd like to share with the audience, or questions you have for me?
I do got one question for you that I can think of. So obviously you've been around these parts for a little bit now, but as we know that you've been in your position for maybe not this specific position, but you've been in the field for a while now. With technology forever changing, what was that one moment where you needed to know a new service, a new program, maybe not programming language, but a new service that your company needed, and you had no knowledge about it, and yet you needed to not deploy, but you needed to use it?
Sure. So that's a everyday aspiration, but it first happened. I had the luxury two different ways. So when I was at App, we had a lecturer at the time who was guest lecturing, getting his MBA, who was running a satellite office. So he allowed me, similar to what Kage, to go apply what I was learning in my managing security. So what I was doing at that time was an intrusion detection system handler. So I worked nights and weekends. So I got to apply my networking concepts my IP tables, and understanding the difference between false positives and true positives. So that led me into my next. Again, a very keen instructor at the time who was also partnering with IBM at the time decided to sponsor her system design class to go get their IDLE foundation. So for those who don't know, that's IT service management's foundation certification to help you understand problem, incident, asset, and change management. So I got that certification, which allowed me to get my first IT job. I joined the IT department and was able to learn IT service management. So I got to run our change advisory board, our compliance reports, which allowed me to sit in front of executives week in, week out. So I met with my CIO and his direct reports at that time. So kind of his part, I learned soft skills very quickly, which allowed me to move up. After that role, I went into a more of a technical role. I moved into a web application monitoring. I had to learn C. I had to write load balancing scripts to test the web apps for availability. We were doing SLA, so service level agreements. So we would run a little script. I would run it in. I'd record it. I'd go in, modify the script, and then set up the schedule to run it. If it failed so many times, it would page out. We would ding them, and then we would fix it. So I quickly learned that. In that role, because I was accelerating, I got asked to do project management and vendor management. So again, I learned a new skill called vendor management because we were replacing an in-house capacity planning tool. So I brought in a vendor to do capacity planning. Again, still got this itch in the back of my head. I haven't got there yet. I moved into a new role, doing electronic document management. I was a BA at first. So I was just doing UX work before UX was popular, setting up fields, making sure it would work. They saw some of my chops, so I helped do data conversion. So we moved from a legacy tool to a new tool. So I did some migration work, and then I joined the back-end team. At that point in time, this is when I put my cyber hat back on. I started doing identity and access management, managing several hundred AD groups, half a dozen process accounts, service accounts for this corporate enterprise application. At the time, it was corporate and nuclear because I was working for a regular utility. That's when I did my professional development. I started meeting at the time with the director of security. Said, hey, I would like to join the security department at this regular utility. He's like, I don't have an opening now, but we had coffee, lunch, coffee, lunch. And then one day he's like, I'm moving on, but we're building out a new team. You should apply again. At that time, he didn't know this, but I had just started my master's program doing information assurance. So I was like, okay, I've got this. So I applied. I joined to build out a Fortune 150 SOC. So a SOC is a security operations center. I built it out as a systems engineer, so a cyber systems engineer. So I was a sysadmin doing security work. So to get back to his question, since it's long-winded, I was tasked with email security. So I helped build out our email security platform. We already had a mail gateway and a security gateway, but we put detonation appliances in. This is when detonation appliances were important. So I put in email detonation and DLP appliances. Then I put in network detonation. So I became the SME for our detonation appliances at this company. Some were inline, some were out of band, some were just off of taps so that we could feed traffic. So the long answer to that is I continue to itch and just keep what I tell people, I take a bite of the apple. I never tried to chew the entire apple. I just took one bite, and that apple turned into an orchard. As you can see from the story I just told you the last 4 minutes now, that's how I continued to peel the onion, to use another analogy, to get to the core, which led me back to putting cyber in my title. Kage knows this because I tell this all the time, and some of you know this too. Security is all of our jobs. I just happen to have security in my title. So I knew security was always part of my role. So in every role I did, without knowing it, I was doing security. And it wasn't until I got into several roles later that I did a presentation on that, of how every role was teaching me the vernacular and the lexicon that we use in 2025 to describe governance, risk, and compliance, cyber defense, cyber architecture, cyber engineering, system engineering. All these were coming into my vernacular. And I never had cyber in my title until almost 8 years ago now. I was an IT person because at that time, IT was still a IT function. Security was still an IT function. It wasn't until probably a decade ago that they started splitting them out and putting them under a CISO or CSO. They always reported to the CIO or a director of security. So that's my long-winded answer, but I figured it was a good story opportunity to understand that keep asking questions, keep taking chances, because you don't know what the next door is going to look like. And every job I did was not great. but it built character and positioned me to be where I'm at today, where I can now lead an entire security department who's over application security, threat and vulnerability management, security operations, DevSecOps. That all sits underneath me today. And I can speak to that and help that because I've touched each of those at some point in my career, sometimes directly, sometimes adjacently. Great question, Coach.
And I guess one more question here is that have you learned anything? Have you learned anything or studied something that you thought was useless? Or have you always found, what you're saying, was it a character learning opportunity, or was it, what did you end up ever using that information?
So you guys are gonna hate me a little bit for this, but I'm gonna say it. There are things that you learn in a degree program that you'll never touch again until you do. So for example, Kage alluded earlier, what drew him to app, I'm an app grad, is it's inside the business school. When I wasn't a student at app, I was like, I don't need these business classes. But I can't tell you how much I reflected back on my business acumen classes of being able to talk to the CFO, the chief operating officer, the CEO on business terms. So another tidbit for you, going to take your question a little off. I didn't think it was important. Learning it allowed me to have that elevator pitch talk. When you walk into the elevator and a C-level stands beside you and they ask who you are and what you do, they don't want a technical answer. They want to say, hey, I'm Fletus Poston. I'm here to protect your company to help you not lose money and help a better ROI. Not that I deploy firewalls, not that I'm blocking and tackling. They can ask the follow-up question, but that first question is you're here to help protect the assets that they have and reduce the spend that they would have in case of a breach. Using business acumen, talking about return on investment, talking about cost management. You're there to control cost, manage cost. All this stuff comes out of cost accounting, comes out of economics, comes out of your strategic management classes that you take in a business school. I alluded to my master's had a business component too. I took some business leadership classes when I got my information assurance master's degree. So the answer to your question, at the time I thought it was. Later on, just like general ed classes in high school, you may not use calculus, but you may have to one day do one basic equation. It's like, oh, I did that 20 years ago or 15 years ago or 5 years ago. Helping my intern, my 10-year-old right now, do basic fraction questions. Like, didn't think about doing percentages and conversions and stuff like that. It happens. There's things we're going to do until the last part of your question. Don't get stuck on a technology because the technology will change. So it's nice to learn a technology. Let me phrase it. Don't get stuck on a vendor. The vendor may not be here. Then also make sure that you can pivot from technology A to technology B because it may not stay the same, and it has not stayed the same. As I alluded, I started in an on-prem environment. That means my email was inside of my four walls. Very few companies, if any, unless you got a regulatory requirement, have email on-prem. It's going to Kage's analogy. They're in Microsoft. They're in Google. They're not in your four walls. They're in a SaaS product, a software as a service platform. That's forced me to learn and grow and apply cloud-based security versus on-prem security, which is the moat. If you use the castle analogy, the drawbridge, the turrets, you don't have those in the cloud. You come into the cloud, your identity is your edge. That's what you're protecting is the identity. Once you're in, you've got to put other controls to monitor and detect. Anything else, Kage, before we wrap this up here?
I think that was good.
So plug a little bit more for those who don't know, a little bit. If you followed me for any length of time on this channel, I've been posting food for thought. So I stopped calling them, but I post them Monday through Friday, sometimes on the weekends, reflecting on anything from AppSec, human-centric security, DevOps. Subscribe to my channel. Look at my daily shorts. They're anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. They're around anything here. As you can see, I'm passionate about this, so I'll take your feedback. I appreciate Kage's time today. I look forward to learning more from him as we continue our mentorship. I thank you for those who joined today and who will watch this. If you found this helpful, like and subscribe. Also, for other plugs, I post a little talk on Mondays, about 20 minutes long, on some similar topics. I try to go live like we've done tonight once a week. I've recently started bringing on guests. For those who chimed in last week or tuned in, we talked about quantum cryptography. Tonight, we talked about the importance of being a student, being a continuous student, applying professional development. I don't know what next week holds, neither do you. So what I challenge you now is to stay safe and stay secure. And until next time, take care.